I know that Tucker Carlson came out over the weekend at the big event that Charlie Kirk had for students down in Florida, in Tampa, Florida. And one of the things that he was saying was this was for sure an Israeli likely operation. Now, I'm just going to say it would be very, very weird for the Israelis to be running an intel gathering operation and us not knowing when it is happening here, connections being made in the U.S. So I don't think the U.S. government is as innocent as some might hope we are, and that may have something to do with none of this coming out in the way that we expected and wanted it to. And so now, Ghislaine, right, who's sitting there in the not so high security prison, she's coming out and saying, well, I am going to go nuclear on all of you. And so what I'll be interested to see is whether or not she makes it, right, to live another day, so to speak, because the last time that happened, her boyfriend got, Dan Bongino wants us to believe that this was of his own doing. But I think everybody's really having a hard time with that. That's just the reality of it, okay? And this is the situation where if you don't have enough information out there and you consider the track record of the deep state and the government, we're all looking at it going, well, this doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. I mean, consider the Hunter Biden laptop that was not supposed to be Hunter Biden's laptop. We had, for goodness sakes, the former head of the CIA, John Brennan, telling us that. You had Mike Morrell, who was the deputy director of the CIA, telling us that. You had Anthony Blinken, who became our Secretary of State, who had been a former Deputy Secretary of State under Obama. Wow, like he was organizing that whole big letter. I mean, that is really just awful. So they've lied to us so many times. You think about what happened with March 2020 and the virus that was invented in the Wuhan lab, but couldn't possibly have been invented in the Wuhan lab. And if you dared say that, oopsie daisy, you're going to be in big, big trouble. Hey, we got to talk about Fauci coming up a little later in the show, because his little pardon could be null and void if it's so decided that Biden didn't really know what was going on. We'll get to that in a second. But you understand what I'm saying. In other words, there's been so much lying that when they say, okay, this is not the case, Ghislaine Maxwell was not a spy, Jeffrey Epstein was not a spy, like, why would you ever think that? We're sitting there going, well, of course we think that. And many, many people within the intelligence community have actually laughed and looked at this whole thing and said, well, if it wasn't actually an intel op, it sure as heck looked like one, right? It definitely looked like one. So the former Israeli prime minister is weighing in on this on Twitter, and he's trying to put to bed some of these accusations that Jeffrey Epstein somehow worked for Israel or the Mossad and was running a blackmail ring of compromise, so to speak. He said, I can tell you with absolute 100% certainty the accusation that Jeffrey Epstein somehow worked for Israel or the Mossad running a blackmail ring is categorically and totally false. His conduct, both the criminal and merely the merely despicable, had nothing to do with Mossad or the state of Israel. Epstein never worked for the Mossad. Of course, if you're the Mossad, you think you're going to own up to that? I mean, come on. Right? That's not actually ever going to be admitted. And this is what you might call an off-the-books operation, if it was an operation, which it certainly seems like it was an operation, and nobody's living to talk about it. And the whole thing is just being put to bed like that. Why would you be putting this to bed unless you had something to hide? And maybe you do have something to hide, because maybe it would be pretty darn demoralizing for the world to learn just how bad, in fact, our government might indeed be. And so she's got some leverage here, and she's trying to use it. And whether or not she succeeds in this, again, I would be surprised. I think she hasn't spoken out enough or much, in part because she's no fool, right? She's no dummy. She knows the danger that she's in, and she's not willing to go down that path. She saw what happened to her dad, if you believe that he was a spy for Israel and various other places, including possibly us. Again, this is all speculation, but they've written books on it, okay? So it's maybe more than speculation. There's certainly a lot of information that's never been actually confirmed about her father. She was the youngest of 9 children, apparently his favorite, continuing on in the family business, first in media, and apparently he had all these intel connections. And it's thought that maybe she even hand-plucked, if you would, one Jeffrey Epstein, who was nothing but a math teacher at Dalton, a fancy private school, interesting, high school. and younger school, actually, a math teacher there in New York City. And she plucks him out after he had kind of been down on his luck as a trader on Wall Street. And suddenly, by the way, introduced by the guy who started Victoria's Secret Limited Brands, Wexler, who was allegedly very close to a lot of intelligence ops as well. So somehow she gets introduced to him, befriends him, so to speak. I mean, you gotta ask the question, was she like the handler? I mean, if you believe that, and again, like I'm admitting my own biases, I have a hard time with what they're trying to tell us to, you know, don't look here, don't look here, don't look here. It almost makes you want to look there more, right? I mean, this was so badly rolled out. And a lot of people, and I get it, are seeking justice here. Not you know, they want justice for the victims, obviously, and they want some kind of accountability. If people were doing bad stuff, like, we should know about it. One, in terms of the list, so to speak, and two, in terms of what our government may have known or not known. And that's not right either. And I just get the sense that we may not see what we want because I think a lot of it got put to bed already. I was joking about Born Identity, right? If you've ever seen that series, you know, when they'd close up shop, you know, you'd have some operation in Timbuktu and suddenly they got to close down the op and everything goes away, right? Everything goes away. Everything gets shredded. Everything goes mysteriously disappears. People mysteriously disappear. And it's all made to look very, very, you know, very legit, except. So now you got a big giant mess, okay? You got a big giant mess. Not just in terms of how it might look if it seems as though the U.S. knew this was going on, but you also just have a mess in terms of, politically speaking, for MAGA itself. And this is one of my concerns. I mean, Donald Trump weighing in on Dan Bongino saying he's going to quit. I can tell you, Dan has no interest in carrying anyone's water and doesn't want to be lied to and may actually feel like he got a really raw deal. And you know what he did? He did, because he was out there having to promote a point of view that was obviously very different than anything he had told us previously, especially on his podcast. And, you know, did he believe it? I have a hard time thinking that Dan would tell us something that he didn't believe. But it was also like he was sort of set up in a way, right? He was sort of set up. Don't forget, he and Kash Patel went on with my good friend and former colleague, Maria Bartiromo, to say, there's no there. And people were like, wait, what? What? Let's go back in time. Remember this?
Are we going to be surprised at what you learned?
You know what, Maria? Kash is not kidding. We've been personally briefed extensively on every single detail, nugget, tendril of this case. One is actively in court right now, so out of respect for the case, it's probably more appropriate that I stay quiet on that. However, I'm not going to tell people what they want to hear. I'm going to tell you the truth, and whether you like it or not is up to you. If there was a big explosive there, right? Given my history as a Secret Service agent and my personal friendship as a director does with the president, give me one logical, sensible reason we would not have. If you can think of one, there isn't. There in some of these cases, the there you're looking for is not there. And I know people. I get it. I understand. It's not there. If it was there, we would have told you.
Okay. Again, I'm just gonna say, like, if it's a good op, you're not even gonna be able to convince Dan Bongino otherwise. If this was done well, right? There will be a lot of questions, but they're also going to have something that looks pretty convincing, at least to some folks in the intelligence community. But anyway, Dan went out on a limb. He didn't look that comfortable during that whole interview. He said all that, and now he's kind of like, wait a second, you're not gonna release anything? Like, you're not even gonna tell us who was on the list? You're just gonna make this whole thing go away? Wait, there is no list? And that actually has him at the point where I think he's uncomfortable enough that he feels he has to say, it's her or it's me. And so this came to a head, as you know, on Friday. We talked about it on Friday. We talked about it on Saturday. It came to a head, and Dan was at the point where, the point of no return. He's like, it's her or me. And I had said on Saturday, I really hope that Donald Trump can convince him to stay because he's a huge asset to the administration. I'm not sure Dan is completely ready, willing, and able to stay at this point, but Donald Trump feels otherwise. Here's Donald Trump speaking just a short time ago, saying he talked to Dan. Dan's in the office today. Things are improving.
Oh, I think so. I did. I spoke to him today. Dan Bongino, very good guy. I've known him a long time. I've done his show many, many times. And he sounded terrific, actually. No, I think he's in good shape.
So he thinks he's going to stay. Again, we'll see. Like, this is not over. Trump also putting this statement out over the weekend and trying to say, like, I don't understand what's going on. Like, basically, you guys are all fighting and this is not good. What's going on with my boys? And in some cases, my gals, they're all going after Attorney General Pam Bondi, who is doing, he said, a fantastic job. And why are you guys so focused on this? And I would get back to this. Like, I think that people feel a little bit betrayed. Right? I think Dan Bongino feels a little bit betrayed, so much so that they had this big fight, apparently Pam Bondi and Dan Bongino, in front of Donald Trump, in front of Susie Wiles, his chief of staff, on Wednesday of last week. And Pam started accusing him of leaking various things, including this story, actually, that was in News Nation, where, in other words, it was communicated that if Kash and Dan had their way, everything would be coming out. Well, duh. I mean, like, anybody who knows Dan, I don't know Kash as well, but I've known Dan a long time, and, like, trust me, Dan wants everything to come out. What reporter doesn't, for goodness sakes? I mean, Anna Paulina Luna also last week was weighing in on this, saying, and she's running that whole op, right, where they're going to be declassifying stuff. She's like, the American people deserve to know the truth about Epstein, regardless of who it impacts. And so there's all this evidence out there, and we ought to be able to see it. She's making that point, and rightly so, guys, rightly so. In other words, the more you cover up, the more the government really doesn't trust you. But remember, if in fact it's what we think, if in fact there's U.S. involvement, or at least, U.S. looking the other way, how's that going to look? Right? How's that going to look? And so what possibly might be going on is an effort to kind of make this whole thing go away, sweep it under the rug, and hope that, we can move on to bigger and better stuff. My only concern is that, this runs the risk of really hurting the MAGA movement because people are so angry. And part of that anger stems from Bondi having promised so much. Remember? I mean, she brought all the influencers in there. And she's like, here, I get phase 1, which was like nothing. It was basically a bunch of public information that everybody had already seen. Phase 1 of the Epstein files, here you go. There's going to be a phase 2. She promised that. And she kept saying, I'm going to get the documents. And then she's like, I got the documents and we're just reviewing them. She was really angry, she said, because she had been promised all these documents and at first didn't get them. And so she handed the influencers a bunch of stuff that was kind of, a nothing burger, and then went on to Fox to try and save her reputation, telling Hannity she's going to get more stuff.
We all did. And the FBI handed over a couple hundred pages of documents. But, Sean, I gave them a deadline of Friday at 8 a.m. to get us everything. And a source had told me where the documents were being kept, Southern District of New York, shock. So we got them all by, hopefully all of them, Friday at 8 a.m., thousands of pages of documents. I have the FBI going through them, and Kash is also, now that we have Kash here, it's a game changer, of course, and Kash is going to, Director Patel, is going to get us a detailed report as to why the FBI withheld all of those documents.
Okay. I wanted
all right. Well, we never really got that detailed. In fact, it sounds like the FBI would just love to release everything. But Pam doesn't want them to. Or somebody doesn't want them to, right? I mean, she told us she had the goods. And now she wants us to believe there's no list.
Released about 120 pages of documents. And I started asking for these documents right when I came into office and before Kash Patel was in there. So I ended up getting about 120 pages. We carefully redacted them, of course, to be sure the 254 women who are victims of their personal information was redacted and out of there to protect them. So I'm going through it and I kept saying, there has to be more. There has to be more. I'm assured that's it. Cash asked the same questions. Assured there's no more. I found out, this week that a source told me New York, SDNY, they're sitting on thousands of pages of documents regarding Epstein. Thousands. And of course, you've seen the very strong letter. We will get everything. We will have it in our possession. We will redact it, of course, to protect grand jury information and confidential witnesses. But the American people have a right to know. And Donald Trump is the most transparent president in our nation.
If she believes that the American people have the right to know what happened, like how did it change? I mean, and why on earth did she keep telling us she had it all? Like, what was that about? A whole bunch of false promises.
DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files. That's all in the process of being reviewed because that was done at the directive of the president from all of these agencies.
So have you seen anything that you said, oh my gosh?
Not yet.
Not yet. All right, not yet. And yeah, she had it all, right? She had it all. And she was going to bring it all forward. It was just a moment of time. We were supposed to wait. Here she is speaking with reporters.
No, the FBI. Yeah, the FBI, they're reviewing. There are tens of thousands of videos of Epstein with children or child. And there are hundreds of victims. And no one victim will ever get released. It's just the volume, and that's what they're going through right now. The FBI is diligently going through that. I haven't seen that statement, but I'll call him later and find out.
Okay, so it sounds kind of like she wanted to blame the FBI. Like, the FBI is going through this. We can't release this because of the FBI. And then, Dan and Cash are sitting there, certainly Dan. And they're saying, but wait a second, well, why can't we release some of this stuff? So that's the question, like, why can't you? And then we learn, because there is nothing? There's nothing to release at all? And that's where I think you're getting into the sticking point, because to say that there's no list and to try and shut it all down, that's where we're kind of having a problem. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that there's going to be serious consequences, political consequences for MAGA if this all gets swept under the rug. And that's actually my concern right now, because I think that this can kind of take on a life of its own. And suddenly when you have big time MAGA influencers agreeing with the mainstream media, then we're kind of in trouble, okay? Like that now it's like, oh, okay. And they're, well, Tucker said this and Laura Loomer said this. And the danger here now is what happens if they do try to continue, because it's bigger than Pam, okay? Like Pam, look, Pam, we've said this before, maybe she's not the best at the gig. And maybe Pam shouldn't be in that job. I think that job should be somebody who is a brilliant attorney and a phenomenal manager. I don't think Pam is, I think she likes going on TV. I didn't disagree with my former colleague, although we just overlapped for like a very brief time at Fox, Megyn Kelly, who spoke about this over the weekend. I don't love that it's taking on a life of its own in a way that is going to put enormous pressure on the president, because ultimately the decision is going to be his, right? And that's going to be extremely tricky. But Megan's not wrong when she's like, what the heck is Pam Bondi doing in the job? The problem is, I think that this problem vis-a-vis whatever happened with Epstein is bigger than just Pam Bondi. I mean, gosh darn it, maybe bigger than Trump. Anyway, I want to play you an excerpt from what Megan had said there on stage at Turning Point USA. Here we go.
I blame Pam Bondi. I'll tell you why, okay? I have nothing, yes, incompetence, yes. She is the reason that things are unraveling around this story right now that virtually all of the Republican Party cares deeply about. Who have you seen? Pam Bondi. She has never missed an opportunity to go on television and dangle sweet nothings that might be coming your way. Try to lead you to believe that she's got it. It's on her desk. It's coming tomorrow. You're going to see something on Epstein. And it was a tease. So you either believe that Pam Bondi was telling the truth then or that she's telling the truth now. But both cannot be true. She was either lying when she went.
Yeah. All right. So what's going on, Pam? Really? Again, I just say that we got to be a little bit cautious here, because look at how they're just coming out of the woodwork. You got Jamie Raskin going on MSNBC saying, okay, you know what? I want to get this list, or at least the part with, and then they're making accusations about Trump, which I do not believe to be true and don't have anything to do with this. But you know what? They're going to feed that conspiracy. So here we go. Here's Jamie Raskin, a congressman, speaking on his favorite network.
At that point, this is a matter of public interest. All of this would have come out during that last trial, but it didn't come out, and all of it should come out. I sent a letter to the Attorney General saying all of these files should be released. Certainly the ones that mention Donald Trump, they should be released. How can Donald Trump get away with campaigning for the release of these files and the whole Republican Party be demanding it, and Pam Bondi say that there's a client list sitting on her desk, and then all of a sudden they want to wave a magic wand and make it all go away? So, look, I think this is a serious matter. It's not just about the division on the right. It's a serious matter that we should know.
So you see where they're going to take it. Incidentally, Pam has responded to that saying, you know what, I misspoke. I didn't mean a list per se. I meant the files. Well, that was a heck of a misspeaking thing to say, right? Because it just ignited everything. Here she was just the other day saying, you know, there actually was no list. And we're all like, really? And by the way, Maxwell's still in prison. Maybe not for long.
Go ahead.
Sure. First, to back up on that, in February, I did an interview on Fox, and it's been getting a lot of attention because I said, I was asked a question about the client list, and my response was, it's sitting on my desk to be reviewed, meaning the file, along with the JFK, MLK files as well. That's what I meant by that. To him being an agent, I have no knowledge about that. We can get back to you on that. And the minute missing from the video, we released the video showing definitively, the video was not conclusive, but the evidence prior to it was showing he committed suicide. And what was on that, there was a minute that was off the counter. And what we learned from Bureau of Prisons was every night, they redo that video. It's old, from like 1999. So every night the video is reset, and every night should have the same minute missing. So we're looking for that video to release that as well, showing that.
Guys, I mean, Bongino totally got a raw deal, right? He had a great show. Who the heck needs that? Then you got to go out and cover for this mess. And it is a mess. All right? Because again, like you heard her, she wasn't even able to talk about whether or not Epstein was part of an intel community. That was an interesting answer. She said, well, we'll have to get back to you on that. I'm not aware of anything. I don't know anything about that. But that was an interesting answer. I suspect that, in fact, he absolutely positively was. I mean, how could he? I mean, it certainly looked like it, right? And I'm going to use what other people have said. Like, you know, if this was not an intel op, it sure as heck looked like one, for sure. You think about Ghislaine Maxwell herself, right? And now she's looking possibly to appeal this 20-year sentence. I just want to point out, you know, she was her father's favorite. Her father is believed to have been connected to Israeli intelligence, U.S. intelligence, possibly even having done some work for the KGB. So she came from this sort of family line of business. He was very instrumental in getting her, or Israel, I should say, it's believed, this so-called Promise software, which built in a backdoor for the U.S. and Israel, allegedly, to allow for this software to follow various people of interest, and it gave them, allegedly, this backdoor entry so that they knew what everybody else was looking at and what they were seeing. And if this software was that fantastic, is that the software that was actually on his home base, on his island in the BVI? that's a worthwhile, like nothing's getting answered. Like what happened to all the tapes and the cameras? Why don't we know anything about that? So if Ghislaine comes forward now, that would be a pretty big deal. Again, they're saying, you know what? She wasn't a spy. He definitely wasn't a spy. Actually, they haven't said that she wasn't a spy, but he definitely wasn't. And it just doesn't really add up. I keep going back to this idea that Jeffrey Epstein sort of came from nowhere and suddenly became uber wealthy. And we can't even fully document like where the source of the wealth was. Well, why not go through all the financial records? Why not have somebody do that? Like that investigation should happen. And, you know, maybe the investigation needs to happen just so that the public has some kind of peace of mind. If there's no there, then do the full-on investigation, okay? Do the money tracing, figure out who was paying him and why. But if you're not going to do that, we're going to be stuck here left with all of these questions. And my concern is what those questions do now to MAGA as a whole. Because it leaves, I think, a very splintered faction where, you know, some people are like, okay, well, who cares? That's what the president has said. Like, why we're going to like waste all our time on this guy. Other people are saying, well, it's not just this guy. It's what possibly the government was doing or other governments were doing. It's the victims that were involved. And we want to make sure that people are held accountable. But it's obviously a complex thing because what you may find out is information that they really, really, really don't want you to have. I'm sorry, but this missing minute thing is bonkers. Like we've talked about this, it's somehow they reset the cameras, it's missing. There's too many convenient things, right? You know, like they move him to a private cell, so there's nobody else around, and then somehow the guys are taking a nap, the security guards, when this is all happening, and then people are thinking that maybe this video was actually tampered with as well, some of the metadata, and some of you guys have even emailed me information about this as well, but this is from Wired, but there's all these ambiguities about the video. It's all so freaking bizarre. And then on top of which, you know, you get this lousy rollout where they're like, we've got it, we're going to release it. Oh yeah, we need a little more time. The Epstein list, it's on my desk, Pam says. And then apparently there is no list. So I don't think anybody was born yesterday and nobody appreciates being lied to. And Dan Bongino, if he was actually being encouraged to do some of the lying, I guarantee he doesn't want any part of it. And he's going to say, who the heck needs this? Thank you very much. Let me go back to doing my podcast every day where, you know, I can speak my mind as opposed to having to carry the company water. But again, I point out with some caution that the left is going to use this for all it's worth. We heard evidence of that, not just from MSNBC with Jamie Raskin, but also over on CNN.
The MAGA base has felt so strongly about Jeffrey Epstein since his crimes came to light. And this has been sort of a rallying cry on the right. There's been some of it, by the way, well documented, his crimes, others that kind of turn over into the conspiracy space, thinking that prominent left-wingers are going to get wrapped up in this sort of network that he was associated with. But this is the first time I can really remember that Trump is sidestepping his base and not doing what they're very vocally asking him to do. And so as there's these calls now by some on the right for Pam Bondi to step aside or to resign and be fired, the thing I would say is if Donald Trump wants all of the information the government has on Jeffrey Epstein to be released, he can make that available. He can direct the Attorney General to release it. He can move to whether it may be law enforcement sensitive to declassify that and make it public. So the fact that he's not, I think, raises a lot of questions. And this is an issue this White House is not going to be able to make go away overnight. You know, this would be a convenient time. Another White House would be able to say, hey, the Department of Justice is independent. We don't tell them what to do. But that is not how this DOJ and this White House operate. So folks are going to expect Donald Trump to weigh in on this.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it's very easy for the Laura Loomers of the world or whomever to blame this on Pam Bondi.
He's not wrong. She's not wrong. In other words, at some point, this is going to escalate and it's no longer going to be Pam's fault. It's going to be somebody else's fault and it's going to be the big guy's fault, right? Like that's the danger here. I think, for MAGA, because I think a lot of people wouldn't be able quite, like they'll forgive him a lot, but they're having a hard time with this. And I'm seeing this in your comments, guys. I'm seeing this in your comments and your reactions, and some of you have reached out to me. I'm seeing this just anecdotally in people that I've talked to. This is going to be a hard one. And it's something that, do you ever watch Scott Adams? He's got like a show he does, really kind of neat, over on Rumble. I want to play you a clip from Scott Adams where he's saying, look, I get it, but, and he's making the point I'm making, that this is starting to get kind of risky in terms of the overall movement as well. Here, listen.
So would you agree that if the normal court system and the way we deal with crime is that we want full disclosure and we want the public to, except for very special cases, we want the public to know everybody who's accused. We want to know who the accusers are, who the victims are. We want to know the names of the lawyers, the judge. We want to know it all. And that's a reasonable standard for justice. Would you agree? That if Epstein is a criminal situation, and the way we handle criminal situations is we want maximum disclosure. It's worked before. There's no reason this would be different. Would you agree? That's a perfectly reasonable take, and that's what most of you have settled on. And now I'm going to flip you to my point of view. That's the wrong frame. It is a criminal situation, and everything you think about it fits that criminal situation frame. But here's the frame I put on it. It's a commander-in-chief decision. Commander-in-chief.
Okay? So if it's a commander-in-chief decision, that's why I'm just saying we're playing with fire here. And MAGA is going to really be at risk of, not saying that we don't deserve all this, but this is going to be a tricky one, right? To navigate. Like, how do you, maybe the answer, I'm speaking out loud, I'm thinking out loud, I think as I talk here on the show, looking at all your comments. Thank you so much for weighing in, because, how do you get out of this? Maybe you get out of this by at least providing some transparency, whatever transparency you can, without completely just blowing open what I think might be there, which is that if he was working for foreign intelligence services, we knew about it. And we didn't do anything about it because guess what? We were in on the act. That's my personal belief. And that's going to be demoralizing and horrible. And, even Donald Trump perhaps doesn't want all of that to come forward. But is there somewhere in between where at least we can feel like some justice is being done? And that the perpetrators and the people that, you got victims here who engaged in this behavior. We need to know a little more about that. And maybe Maxwell will be the key. If she makes it that far, right? She's saying she's going to talk. She's willing to talk, apparently. I think that this story may have gotten planted by some Dems who definitely want her to talk, or at least frighten some people. I don't know. I don't know. But somebody put this story out. And if she's really willing to speak, then that kind of is the whole game changer. If she'll tell the truth. If she'll tell the truth, and she will talk about who's on the list and what actually really went down. So maybe that's the middle ground here. You bring her in for testimony. The other person I would like to see brought in for testimony would be Alex Acosta. In other words, what did he know to make the decision that Jeffrey Epstein should not get a really bad punishment that one normally would have gotten in the state of Florida for what he was being accused of doing? Why did they do that? And is there any there to the Daily Beast report at the time that he was told, this guy's one of us, he's one of our intel ops, he belongs to us, don't do anything too crazy. Give him a decent enough sentence so he can go on his way. We need to ask Acosta that. Again, former labor secretary, bring him in. Bring Maxwell in. Let's learn what what we can learn, again, without, because I think that the MAGA movement is not going to like sit by and allow this to happen. I think it's going to be very hard for people to move on here, because we're all about transparency and we're all about what's fair and what's right. And you think about deep state and what they did do. And if they cover this one up, are they going to do more stuff in the future? That's the reality of where we are right now. As for Bongino, look, I don't know if he's going to stay on. I really don't. I think he's kind of had it, and he doesn't want to be part of this. And I get it. I get it. We'll see if the president is able to keep him. He's a good egg. But there's a lot going on in this particular moment in time.